Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 483 of Putin's invasion into Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Olexiy Arestovych, and Russian opposition politician, lawyer, and blogger Mark Feygin. Thank you guys for your continuous support. Today's thanks go to Bill S., Bikeris, also Jal Lai, and Wellis. Thank you. We do appreciate your support. And with this, day 483. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all on Feygin Live. It is Wednesday, June 21st. Time is 10 p.m. in Kiev, same time in Moscow. And we're doing our regular stream, day 483, with Olexiy Arestovych. Olexiy, we're glad to see you. Likewise, Mark. So, when do you think we'll start dividing Roman Abramovich's money? Oh, too late. I already took it. Right. Just like in the movie. What about Kozlevich? No, ain't getting any. Our viewers already are with us. Please continue sharing links, clicking the like button. That definitely helps for the stream to go up in the list of recommended videos. And do not forget to subscribe to Feygin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, and to the Privateer Station if you are listening or watching that in English language. So let's start with, I think you've seen that phenomenal statement by Prigozhin about situation on the front. I think we can make it a main topic of today's stream and talk about it. So what did Prigozhin say? Now, again, that's what he says. He's a faulty source. You can trust or not trust his statements, but they're worthy of discussion. And he's bringing information into the limelight that is definitely going against what Moscow says, and also is going against what Kiev says, which is not confirming most of what Prigozhin has stated. So, for example, he said that Ukrainian military are going towards Molochny Liman. If they get there, Russia will lose most of their occupied territories in that area. Putin is being deceived and being told by non-existing successes. In the meantime, Ukrainian military already are crossing Dnieper River, and the first groups are already on the left bank. He also said there are 50 Ukrainians already noticed in the village a little north from Takmak. Sadova is slightly, see that red spot at the bottom, 637, and there is a village just slightly above, about 20 miles above it. And of course, there is some success in Pitikhatki, Rabotino, etc. Can you say anything about that? I don't know, Mark. I don't know. Does it look... that's weird. Does it look like truth? Or can it be truth? Well, the task of special forces is to work deep in the enemy's background, and they're not the ones usually fighting on the front line. So very probably somebody can be noticed in different places, solving different tasks. And they have a lot of tasks to do. But until motorized infantry or heavy tank battalions arrive, it's difficult to talk about taking back the territories until they're really firmly returned. We might need to measure that with successes with mechanized brigades and motorized infantry. Well, let's look at it from this direction. Well, in this direction, it is nothing to write home about, because regardless of what Prigozhin is saying, officially we have not changed the front line much. Plus, we usually do not report our successes until we really cleared the area, and then probably withstood even a couple of Russian attacks on our positions, and then we can report that. So our information politics is very careful in this regard. So in this aspect, there are not too many messages of successes from the front. Perhaps we are moving, but we are not at the stage where we can officially confirm that. So it looks on this map, though, like Pitikhatki, the one on the 9 o'clock, the blue area, that you actually pushed the front. Yeah, we did. There is definitely some motion towards Ryganka, motion towards south, and in some of the villages down occupied by Russia, they already are implementing martial law, and that's usually a good sign for reporting the progress of Ukrainian progress. Well, thing is, though, that lower at the bottom, that's where the main defense line starts. If you can bring those lines on the map, you can see where yep, here they are. So I suggest do not be too happy to giddy before the right time. Actually, everything is going pretty well regarding the destruction of Russian forces. Even at the beginning of the war, we did not have these numbers when we were shooting them in the columns and destroying a mass. That means that we are slowly grinding them down in the area, so eventually they will give. As for crossing Dnieper, we had a little bit of information from our operative command south, whose speaker said that Russian troops that withdrew from the left bank of Dnieper, they're returning there because they think they still need to cover and generally monitor the area. That is generally a good point because that means that these forces will not be thrown anywhere else on the front, in Zaporozhye, for example. All right, what about Kakhovska Dam and the catastrophe? Did the water subside to the pre-destruction level, and did it bring the area to the to some readiness for possible military action? It's a difficult question mark because the water did go down, but it did soak the bank for at least 5 yards down. So the soil is very swampy and it will not hold any heavy equipment for quite a while. But we do have some operative groups in the area, and if near the area that they were talking about, near the Pristan, if we have Golaya Pristan, it's at the mouth of the river. If indeed we have some people there, that means we can move anywhere from this point. You can go to Kinbursk, you can go down south, you can go to the right, so you can go anywhere from that point to Ironport, to Kalanchak, and others. So they will be concerned and they will be covering their flanks. That means that these forces will not be sent anywhere where the main direction of our attack is. So, yeah, which basically on the wide front from Zaporozhye to Great Novoselka. Let's also look at Kremenная Svatova, because you did mention in your earlier stream that, and it's being confirmed, that Moscow is trying to attack in that area to pull some of the Ukrainian troops to that direction, to weaken them, to weaken the counteroffensive in the other parts. We talked with you, right, that this was the only group in the whole front that had enough potential for any offensive on the operative level, and that's what they're starting. They are trying to play a similar game that we do. They're trying to pull our reserves. Today, there's some heavy fighting near Torska. That's from Kremenная towards Yampol and towards National Park, Saint Mountains, Holy Mountains. Aviation, artillery, and Russian tanks are being used profusely. The fighting is pretty heavy there. Even our military confirmed that we moved a little bit in one direction, and then they said they had to counterattack and captured the positions back. There was not too experienced brigade there, a new one, and the main, you see that Russian protrusion to the left, that's where the main effort occurred. And our brigade withdrew a bit, then the more experienced ones came to help them, and they're pushing back. The fighting is hard in the area. Responding to the question whether it will affect situation in the south, no, it will not. We have enough reserves to not, and enough forces here to not throw any reserves up north to Sapotorskaya and general Crimea Kupyansk direction. Now we can look south towards Belogorovka, right after Seversky Donetsk, which is a little to the west from Lysychansk. This is where our troops are attacking. We captured, here, we captured some of the positions that used to be occupied by Russians, and they were continuously occupied by Russians since the time when they occupied Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. So now we're pushing back here. And also we can go down to Bakhmut. Same situation there. We are moving south to Klishevka and Berhovka. But as the official spokespersons confirmed today, since our opponent is throwing reserves in that direction too, not much, but they do have some. For 2 days, we already have rather active engagements there, and we're butting there at one point. None of the parties managed to change the front line in the south of Bakhmut. Then we can go to Avdiivka. They're very active there too. They're trying to push on the north. You can see a couple red arrows there. There was their attack on us, according to our military, and then we pushed back and restored the status quo. And Russians then reconsidered, picked new directions, and started pushing there. So they can continue doing that. They'll fail near Avdiivka. That's not an option for them to take it. Near Marienka, they're also trying to be active towards the south of it. It's more difficult for them there. It's also fortified on our side, so they're trying to follow that orange road. And towards Novomayorskaya, the heavy fighting ensues, and it's the second day of Russian counterattacks on the positions that we captured at the beginning of counteroffensive. This is good. Hastily devised counterattacks are good for us because that's where we destroy a lot of their equipment, and that's the reason why one of the roads near Pitikhatki, our soldiers called it Chernobyevka too, because it's filled to the brim with destroyed Russian equipment. Near Remeyevskaya, there's also a lot of tank engagements, and the level is so intense that they recently lost the commander of a big detachment, a colonel rank, so you can imagine how heavy does it get there. So in general, if you look at the whole front line for 2 days in a row, it's Russian side counterattacking our positions. So Russian side is burning their resources rapidly, trying to recapture what they lost. This is good. This is what we need, because at one point they will run out of these resources. Good. We have 150,000 watching us already. We've been live for about 13 minutes. Several dozen thousands already clicked the like button. Please do not forget to keep doing that. That is very important. Little things you can help us. Let's talk about the situation related to recent statements made by Prigozhin. As we understand, that statement about 32,000 inmates that he is commanding over, that he is not going to sign anything with Ministry of Defense, apparently. Yet he still continues his line that he is attacking Russian Ministry of Defense and bickering with them, even though on the outside it looks like he might have lost this bureaucratic battle. In your opinion, what is he fighting for right now? And what... there is also one news I want to throw in before you comment on that. It is about one of his colleagues. There was a shootout in a cafe. The head of Angara Boxing Federation was attacked by Wagner, one of Wagner's troops. and he was the president of that association was wounded. His friend was killed, and the boxing club Ahmad representative, who was Wagner, active Wagner operative, was the one who started that shootout. So we do not need to go too deep into that, but I think these things will start happening throughout Russia. These criminal engagements. Oh yeah, I also heard another one that some of the Wagner troops, when they came back from the front, they were also milked by some Armenian mafia in one of the border towns where they were in minority, and the mafia just forced them to pay money. So that also hit some news. Well, as for Prigozhin, he is fighting for exclusion. He is fighting to be excluded personally, and his Wagner group, from a need to sign anything with Ministry of Defense. They're much more likely to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense of Sudan, Mali, or Central African Republic. They do not necessarily want any contracts with Russian Ministry of Defense. Do you think he will succeed? I don't know, but he is doing his damnedest best to do that. 1st of July is upon us, so it's a little bit to wait and see. All right. We'll have several news now about weapons supplies, and I think, or at least I gauge that squall of these news is aimed at sweetening a little bit the situation in regards of Vilnius NATO summit that's happening, and some foggy perspectives for Ukrainian membership in NATO. Even though newspaper Monde recently published that French position changed, France is now definitely for Ukraine joining NATO. So if you can comment on all of them. In Pentagon, they mentioned that they over-evaluated the package they sent to Ukraine by $6.3 billion. 6.3, right, 6.3. And it means that United States will basically need to... Oh, sorry, I switched to Ukrainian. Yeah, let's speak Russian here, Mark. Sorry, it's been a busy day. Let's switch to a traditional language that we are conducting this stream in. So Pentagon basically found another 6.3 worth of money they can provide to Ukraine. They essentially used the new pricing for just factory-produced equipment in order to calculate the overall cost of supplies to Ukraine, when in reality they were supplying the ones restored from conservation, a lot of used items, which cannot be or should not be gauged at the same price as the newly manufactured ones. So upon figuring out the difference in cost, they found that they actually can supply $6.3 billion worth more of equipment. This is a huge add-on, and we all are rather excited here in this regard. In terms of, we'll be getting military supplies for that amount. That's fantastic. Do you think there is any dependency on Vilnius NATO results? Probably. And right now there's a lot of being discussed about general support of Ukraine, reconstruction, and all. There is a conference also happening now, and of course each conference is concluded of this type is concluded with a lot of gifts and support. So, and this is also a message the West is sending to Putin and his regime, that support of the West is not waning. For example, Germans today, they also announced another package of support to Ukraine. And yeah, let me interject here. United States also going to provide $1.3 billion. Oh yeah, that's financial help. That's financial help for economy and reconstruction and all. Basically, half for the infrastructure, another half for stabilizing the energy system. Great Britain dedicated $3 billion in over 3 years. EU also 5 billion euros over 5 years. So they are giving us a lot of gifts, and there is a lot of good messaging behind that directed at Putin, that we have been supporting Ukraine, we are supporting, and we will continue doing that. Plus, three countries already announced that they're ready to build military factories on the territory of Ukraine: Poland, France, and Great Britain. And they said that they'll be building military factories here, which is a serious story. Before then, we only heard from Rheinmetall, Germany, that they will be building something with us together. Another 500 million euros coming from European Bank of Reconstruction for hospitals, schools, and other objects. And also, we should probably bring the statement by Schmigel, one of our officials, that these restorations should be done at the cost to Russia, at the money that are frozen there in the West. That would be fantastic, right, Olexiy? Von der Leyen, though, came out today and said that they still are looking for legal justification how to confiscate these assets. And yeah, it's not a simple process, but they did regulate the 11th package of sanctions, right? The white smoke has risen. So they are confirming different numbers, and I think it's worth diving into that. The lion's share of the products that is falling onto our heads, Shaheds and some missiles, is comprised of United States manufactured components. So today, some kind people calculated what's it worth to Americans, that whole story. I will not go too detailed into that, but the logic is as follows. American manufactured chips are being sent, microchips are being sent to Russia via the gray schemes. And that company is getting $1.3 million monthly as revenue. And US budget needs to spend $250 million in military aid to counter that. So 290 times more to counter the results of that gray sale of microchips. So this is something for our viewers to think: how much does it cost to America, their inability to cull these gray schemes and to prevent this from happening continuously in perpetuity. So European Union is now getting more active, and they're actually including these punishments for gray schemes. It's a very serious step in the 11th package of sanctions, because there are very few examples in history. Very often, gray schemes are difficult ones to track, because one needs to start to look deeper into the trade and somewhat disturb the principles of free trade. So they, however, are still intended to do that, and they're finding ways to cull that trend. And there is also an interesting element to that 11th package: more sanctions about or towards people who are related to evacuation of Ukrainian kids to the Russian territory. So they're continuously pushing that hurt button, that pain point for Putin. And the Netherlands also created another stern position about trying to track the situation with kids with their deportation to Russia. And since Russia recently announced that they're doing some certain investigation about the methods and ways the Ukrainian kids were extradited to the territory of Russia, this same button is being pressed again by Europe, reinforcing their statement that that should not have ever happened. Right, Olexiy, I actually keep hearing from different sources that Putin is very painfully reacting to that criminal warrant, the warrant of the criminal court about kidnapping. And yeah, so they're continuously pushing these buttons. And another bipartisan resolution was supported by Congress in the United States, and that resolution is requesting Biden administration to supply ATACMS missiles to Ukraine with a range of 300 miles. Yeah, Michael McCall, he is the head of the Republican group in the chamber, so addressing the concerns that if Republicans come to power, the support of Ukraine will wane. Here's an answer to those who are concerned about that. No, it won't. And by the way, as one of the candidates that is to a presidential position recently said in the United States, I'm first of all a Christian and only then a Republican. So yeah, that reminds me of Kissinger's statement, I'm first American, then Secretary of State, and then a Jew. And Golda Meir related to that said, well, yeah, in Israel we just write it from right to left. There's another small news worth discussing. One of the American companies recently mentioned, is it American or European? Sorry, I'm trying to remember. So not too important, but one of the Western companies signed a contract to supply the newest equipment for our helicopters that saves them from being hit by missiles. And there were a couple of hints that their system of fire control might also be corrected and enhanced with the products of this company. And if that manifests, it will mean a much higher effectivity of these machines on the battlefield. And also, American manufacturer of Avram, the air-to-air missiles, they fly from 70 to 180 kilometers. They rapidly increase their production rate, and they're not really shying away and saying, well, we're doing it for Ukraine. And we're talking about 1.5 to 3,000 missiles of that type. With 3,000 missiles of Avram type, you can bury the whole Russian aviation. And this is a sign, this is an interesting sign, that this missile is launched from air. It also has a radio location self-targeting system, active targeting system. And it can be targeted either by AVAX, the Intel airplane behind and the lines behind helicopters, or it can be guided from US-based jets like F-16s. So this means a very good news for Russian aviation, Russian military aviation. It will cease to exist in a certain time frame. So this is very good news for us. All right, what else can we say here? I want to address another topic with you, Olexiy. There was a piece of news today about 3 UAVs supposedly were shot down in Moscow suburbs, that they were downed with radio electronic measures, and there was a lot of bickering about who, why, what were they doing there, who launched them. So in your opinion, and simultaneously, in one of the military salons was announced that Ukraine managed to create a missile with a range of 1,000 kilometers. Ukrainian defense military. Mark, missile and UAV are two different things. Oh, sorry, I meant to say UAV. Yeah, UAV with 1,000 kilometers flight range. So in this context, I want to ask, does it mean that Ukrainian made UAVs, doesn't matter which components are there, could be foreign, but in general, they will be reaching 1,000 kilometers deep in Russia? Well, yes, they're actually talking about some explosions in Sevastopol, and people are reporting that they don't know what, but was very loud. So, of course, they will. Of course, they will reach to Russian military positions even deeper. And Shoigu recently came out and said Ukrainians want to launch HIMARS and Storm Shadows on Crimea, and in this time will respond and destroy their centers of decision-making. But one needs to think here that Prigozhin may not be exactly wrong when he is characterizing Shoigu mental abilities, because HIMARS, if you think about it, shoots for 80 kilometers. So Russian Minister of Defense is basically saying that in order for Russians to use HIMARS on Crimea, they need to be, for Ukrainians to use HIMARS on Crimea, Ukrainian military needs to be at the mouth, at the border of Crimea. That's what you can read from his statements. So everybody from Vasilivka to Jankoy can surrender already, or he's already considering that they will withdraw and retreat, because otherwise HIMARS will never be able to reach Crimea. Right now we have 190 kilometers at the shortest, and it won't reach. So I don't know who is preparing these statements for him, or he is inventing these things by himself. I think their kingdom is very messy at this point. And I can add that it's not just HIMARS and UAVs that we managed to progress with. Today, for example, in Feodosia, a rail tracks had some issues, and there are a lot more things happening, disrupting their supplies and economy. Okay, today in the news, Putin also met some graduates of military schools, and he did say about the flow of Ukrainian counteroffensive that some quieting, some quelling down can be observed because Ukraine is losing its steam, even though the reserves are not depleted, and Ukraine supposedly is reforming the damaged brigades into new detachments. And our guys on Ukraine, and he says Russian troops destroyed 245 tanks of the Ukrainian side. I think personally he's finishing like 20 tanks a day at least, right? And he's finishing personally in all senses of this meaning. So he's also saying that the losses amassing like that will lead Ukraine to losing the steam further and to losing the capability to do anything active on the front. Just last week you said 140 something tanks were destroyed, right? When does he have time to destroy another 100? Mark, it's easy. He takes Russian losses and he gives them out as Ukrainian. Oh, that's an old tactics, right? I think he needs to be court-martialed for treason, by the way, because what do he says they're destroyed in Ukraine, but according to the constitution and to his own decree, which he probably is not familiar with, these territories that where the fighting is ensuing now are considered to be newly acquired Russian territories. So the war is raging on their territory, right? According to their philosophy. Now we probably should await a scream from Prigozhin. Shoigu, more ammo. Putin, these are Russian territories. Speaking of Shoigu, we have been inviting him for a long time, and we should, yeah, I'm calling upon him. Is he afraid to come here and join? Evgeny Viktorovich, somebody tell him, please come to the stream. We'll be glad to discuss. Why is he afraid? He's 1,000 kilometers away. It's just YouTube. There's no reason to be squeamish about that. And speaking of HIMARS, by the way, Shoigu is correct about HIMARS hitting Crimea because, yes, our HIMARS specialists are texting me saying, yeah, HIMARS will hit Crimea from Crimea very shortly. Okay, so we've been 33 minutes trolling Russian leadership. Let's talk about Putin now, who made another counter statement to counter Biden's commentary about possible nuclear escalation. He says that Russian military complex will be equipping YARS systems. It's a new heavy missile that is capable of carrying nuclear warhead. So look, before we had some statements made by Putin and Lukashenko about positioning tactical nukes on the territory of Belarus. Then Putin, at his St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, said that theoretically anything is possible. It's war, so there could be tactical nukes used in there, but right now we're not going to. But that was some mumbling. And Biden came out at about the same time frame and said, you know, things are real, so everything may happen on the front. But he was also talking about Colorado River that is experiencing drought, among other things. So Putin was just one of the blips in his speech. But he did mention that Putin is a threat. What do you think about that? We have a statement by our special forces leader Budanov that Russia will not be using nukes at this war. And there are different things progressing. And many people are thinking that all in Putin's governments are idiots except for the head of the central bank, Nabiulina. But it's always easier to take the fringe position and say that no, they will 100% not use it, or B, 100% they will use it. But I think personally that there is some probability of nukes being used. One of the condition would probably be one of the critical points will be entering of Ukraine military into Crimea, because I don't think he will just allow and do nothing for Ukraine to retake it back. So he might be using different threats and escalating the nuclear element of that. But I'm leaning to see that there'll be a lot of nuclear bluff, but the use of it might happen only under certain exceptional circumstance, because China is seriously against that. And I think Biden was talking and sending his message to Chinese. When Blinken was visiting China and having a 10-hour long meeting, they probably achieved some baseline about the nuclear position, nuclear holding of escalation. And Biden wanted, I think, to make a right move in that fishing game, because unofficially they came to a certain agreement with China, and he wanted to re-emphasize that no, this will not be happening. In terms of Russia using nukes, China is vehemently against that. They think this is unnecessary escalation, very dangerous escalation. India is also against this probability, against Russia using nukes. And these are two main groups that are providing extra stability for Putin's regime, and it's very difficult for Putin to quarrel with them. And then there are more discussions that they will not be using strategic weapons. They might use tacticals, but it kind of works for offensive. It doesn't really, it's not worthy for defense. And using en masse, that creates an extra risk for nuclear fallout in Europe. So everybody will be alerted and will be reacting to that. And that also creates a precedent of a nuclear country using nukes against a non-nuclear country. So this will be breaking some framework that exists in the world today. So many countries will be opposing it. And that's why I think these are the arguments that he won't. And if he does, then we'll react to that. Then there'll be a plan B. Well, here's the thing, that plan B is not really voiced by any officials. We had Ben Hodges who mentioned that. But Ben Hodges is not an official person. Well, these statements, these scenarios are usually voiced by unofficial people, right? Because he used to be a commander of all the American forces in Europe. He is keenly familiar with the strategy. Right, that's true. But I think it might be a good statement if the West would come out and say, if Putin uses nukes, we'll kill him. Well, there's no need, Mark, to kill Putin. At first, they need to kill Russian army, and then it'll be much easier to kill Putin. What will be a punishment if they decide to use nukes? Because general variant B and punishment is kind of nebulous. Very often there's a temptation when there's going to be nothing. And that's what they can play in Russia. Mark, on my side, I tend to believe Ben Hodges. I can remind our viewers, those who might have forgotten from one of the earlier streams, he said that if Russia uses tactical nukes, they will lose Black Sea Fleet and all of their troops on the Ukrainian territory in one action. And after that, Mark, we can, Ukrainian military can reach Vladivostok if we want to. And we might just engage a couple of police vehicles on the way, because there'll be nothing left of the army. All right. So the consequences of that escalation, do you think this may lead to several countries increasing their funding and research of nuclear weapons? Yeah, so-called border countries that are on the verge of developing nukes, right? Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, by the way. That'll be very tempting for those countries. If the Pandora box opens and the weapon is used on the front, and if Russia, indeed, you're right, shared that with Belarus or transferred some of it to Belarus. And that brings another question in the frame, that Ukraine will get 101% probability of building nukes. Can Ukraine make them? Yeah, we can. What is the time frame? Pretty short time frame. Is it because you have nuclear energy, nuclear industry in Ukraine? It'll just take a little bit to get enriched uranium or plutonium, but you can also buy things here and there. You can find things. So it doesn't matter how, but yeah, technically we can. So basically, if Ukraine is left facing this problem, they can find a way, they can devise their own weapon. Mark, if nukes are used against us, what can you be used to your defense? You can either be accepted to NATO overnight, or we need to create our own nukes because there are no other guarantees. And this is where I'm leading to, Olexiy. This is the situation that's where it goes to. If you don't accept us, you don't leave us much other options. Well, it depends, because if they cannot accept us to NATO immediately, they can change our military and reinforce us and make us NATO-style army, help us create that. That will essentially hold us two heads above the Russian level of military. That may be another way, but if Russia uses nukes, then yeah, that's a serious question. Then we'll need to provide for our own safety. That'll be a serious question. Mark, of course, yeah. If nukes are used against you, then it is a serious step. They will use it again if you do not have anything to counter that. So that'll be a very strict question and a very serious reaction to that. And reaction to the use may be very surprising to the side that decides to use nukes. All right, so we've been 41 minutes live. Last topic, I need to comment on your prognostication about South African Republic, that whole charade was devised in order to give Putin an option to visit South Africa for the BRICS summit, because when they're negotiators, they do not have an obligation to arrest him and to follow the order of International Criminal Court. So, in your opinion, the initiative overall has failed, right? Nobody supported it, neither Kiev nor Moscow. Well, Mark, initially this initiative was only devised for one thing, that they would have a way out of using any sanctions against Putin, either arresting him or prohibiting him from visit. So now they're sheltering themselves with the status of intermediary. International convention, Copenhagen Convention, also has that statement that negotiator should not be, is actually free from making any motions that will revoke that negotiator status from them. So they're basically playing that card. Of course, yeah, South Africa ratified Roman Statute, but they cannot be following it because they are now intermediary in the negotiations. And by the way, South Africa was not the only country that visited, and there were other countries presented, and I can bet you one of these countries would be the place where Putin's planes could land for refueling on the way. So do you think Budanov can shoot it down? I'm just asking bluntly, do you think his plane can be shot down over Africa? Mark, I think this is not a trivial task to shoot down the jet of a Russian president. But I'm just trying to prognosticate here, to reconstruct that eventuality. Mark, reconstruction follows after the event, so probably it's a little too early to do that. All right, we have 74,000 likes, 200,000 plus are watching us. We've been long enough for about 40 minutes, so please continue sharing likes. Continue sharing that stream, clicking like buttons. This is the little support you can do, and do not forget to click subscribe button if you have not done that yet. And we shall see you on Saturday, right? As I understand, Saturday 10 p.m. Kiev. Yep, usual. See you on Saturday, and English version will come out on Sunday morning Eastern. See ya.